In my restless dreams, I see that town, Dayton, Tennessee. For most of my adult life, I have longed to live and be a part of that little hamlet nestled comfortably in the Appalachian Mountains. I feel as close to this small slice of Tennessee as I do a family member. It has been a part of my heart for years, and to stay separated from it has brought me great pain. Dayton, Tennessee, and Ray County has seen almost everything at one point or another. For the span of a day, it was the capital of the United States. The famed Scopes monkey trial took place within its borders at the local courthouse. Plus, it is home to the beautiful Pocket Wilderness State Park, which is one of the most gorgeous places in all of God's creation in my humble opinion. And now, this quiet and serene portion of the Appalachian Mountains has become the final resting place of my father, Johnny Henderson, and my mother, April Henderson. My father, who was so distraught at the loss of my mother, is now resting comfortably beside her, and though he is not alive to realize it, he has been reunited to her in one way or another. Sleeping by her side once again as he always used to in sweet yesteryear, joined together at last in our family cemetery, which is one of the areas that was near and dear to his heart. He's in a special place, waiting for our Lord and Savior to free him from the cocoon that is the grave. Whenever the chance arose for us to visit Dayton, there was rarely a time that we did not visit the old family cemetery, which is where most of my loved ones currently sleep. This quiet and serene portion of Ray County houses some of the most colorful lives to have ever played out, in my humble opinion. Men and women who were strong, people who had hearts of gold, and people who lived out their lives bravely, though often it was coarse and difficult to bear. And because of these individuals, this land was very special to my dad, and it was here that he chose to be buried himself. This whole land was his special place, whether it was the lake down at Point Park, Buzzard Point, which is at the pinnacle of the mountains, or even Sweet Pocket Wilderness, which is a piece of heaven on earth for us Hendersons. Yes, friends, the natural beauty and history of this town was rarely far from his thoughts. But when it came to the strange and unknown side of Ray County, that history was particularly precious to him. Dayton is no stranger to the unusual, for it is here that some of the most peculiar stories that I have ever heard have taken place. There is no end to the colorful array of tales that have seeped out of this mountain town, whether it is simply the tribe of Sasquatch that are occasionally seen in Pocket Wilderness by the hikers and the park officials, or even descriptions of almost ghostly Black Panthers, devils that are physically dragged out of haunted homes, and even on one occasion, a sighting of what can only be described as a legitimate werewolf. Yes, friends, this rural piece of Appalachia is lush with stories that could grant one conversations for many hours. But one particular creature has stood out in my mind for many years, and it has filled me with a simple fascination that I cannot quite explain. This creature is not particularly well known, nor is it all that dignified in nature, yet it has been sighted across these majestic mountains for many, many years. The animal which I'm referring to is the Appalachian grave robber, and although there's but little known about this critter, on rare occasion you can still find a glimmer of information, or you may possibly meet someone who has had a first-hand encounter, or has been handed down stories from family member to family member. But what exactly is an Appalachian grave robber, you might be asking? If it warrants an entire nightmare nugget, then surely it is a creature that demands attention, right? It may disappoint some, but like I said, there's nothing particularly amazing or breathtaking about these animals. For whatever reason, they have always garnered my interest and caused me to gather as much information as I possibly can. In person, they somewhat resemble an anteater mixed with a weasel, and it is most known for digging into the fresh graves of the dead and consuming the bodies. Thus they have acquired the literal name, grave robber. At one point in history, these Appalachian ghouls proved to be such an issue that many graves came equipped with either a stone slab covering the topsoil, or a structure was built on top of the dirt to prevent the grave robber from digging into the graves. But this intriguing animal has all but disappeared from history, not even existing in the form of an urban legend, rather, a footnote in time. But where has it vanished to? It would be speculation on my part, but I would guess that as mankind transitioned from using the classic pine box coffin to using the modern and traditional metal casket, it caused their numbers to drop. I'm sure there are numerous reasons, but this is one of my personal theories. The grave robber was somewhat notorious to the Appalachians, and it eventually gained a reputation as a pest more than anything. The Richmond Dispatch reported on the grave robbers in 1902, and on the fear that they caused to the community. The article reads, "Human graves have been dealt with in a most mysterious way, and bodies are missing. It is stated further that it is not the work of human grave robbers, but of some animal which burrows into the graves, causing the loose earth above to sink." But reports of the mysterious eaters of the dead extend even further, reaching Tennessee, Virginia, and Indiana, and even Kentucky. There was a time when these animals brought a great amount of stress and concern to small towns and communities because of the ghastly treatment of their loved ones' final resting places, and unless there was someone there to continually watch the grave, there was little protection available unless you took the time to build either a grave covering or a grave house. Thomas D. Clark's 1941 book, The Kentucky, had this to say regarding the elusive animal. A faithful servant of the community was consigned to the earthly bosom of the hill country. A grave house was erected over the mound. These little houses protected the grave from both the elements and that fiendish ghoul, the grave robber. Many Kentucky mountain people still believe that there is an animal resembling, so it is said, a cross between a slender weasel and an anteater. This thieving varmint, according to Highland legend, digs into the grave and destroys the body. Likewise, the grave house is a mark of profound respect and enduring love. My very own family cemetery, where my mother and father was just buried, has its own version of the Appalachian grave house, and it was actually in this same cemetery where my dad in his youth used to find the small burrow going down deep into one of the graves. This mountain ghoul was no stranger to Dayton. It was here in Ray County, Tennessee, that it made its rounds, diving down deep into the earth with the freshly dead. And because it was found there on occasion, it became part of my family's oral tradition, where stories made its way from family member to family member, until it finally reached my dad, Johnny Henderson, who in turn passed it on to me. The Democratic Messenger wrote in 1886 about them saying, "Mysterious grave robber's animal, Ballville Township and vicinity, is in a state of ferment on account of the ravages of a ghoul in McGortley Cemetery. It is evidently the work of an animal which is burrowing among the graves, bringing human skulls, bones, coffin handles, and the like to the surface. An investigation of the grave of a child which was buried there several years ago demonstrated that the animal had made a nest therein and lined it with flags, which had been placed on a soldier's grave on Decoration Day. It is not known what species of animal it is which is doing this ghastly work, but people who think they have seen it describe it as having a long nose, short legs, and a bushy tail. Efforts have been made to kill or capture it, but so far they have proven fruitless. 7 graves are known to have been entered by the animal." But what has to be one of the most unique newspapers connected to this critter comes from a 1911 newspaper clipping that describes a child being held captive in a cage for a public show. To place a child in a cage with so-called grave robbers exhibited at shows is cruel treatment, according to the authorities, who took a young girl from A.L. Johnston and wife at Farmingdale, with an order to take the child and to bring her to the city to be placed under the protection of the court, awaiting an order for its disposition. Sheriff Hewitt was sent to Farmingdale last night, and the child was brought here. The Johnstons exhibited the grave robbers, properly called armadillos, in the city during stock meeting week, and after leaving here, placed the child in the cage with the grave robbers and other animals to attract a crowd by a chilling recital of a child eaten alive. All I know is from what my friends tell me about this child. He had light hair and blue eyes and very fine featured, a very pretty and bright child, but his little legs have been so badly bitten and that they are so sore he groans when they handle him. Is this grave robber the same critter as our Appalachian carnivore? The article referred to these grave robbers as armadillos, and it is true that they've been known to dig into graves, but it's only because of the loose soil, and they're merely digging for grubs and other insects, not the flesh of humans. In fact, the armadillo being considered a gravedigger is somewhat of a myth because of this. And it should be noted that there are some armadillos that eat carrion, but they don't actively seek out the meat of humans. So is it possible that this child really was placed in a cage with these mysterious ghouls? Who can say, friends? The Indianapolis Star had this to say in 1917. Animal grave robber raids northern Indiana cemetery. When a relative had occasion to visit the St. Clair family lot in the Carter Cemetery in Jackson Center, it was discovered that some animal, able to enter and leave a hole 8 inches in diameter, had burrowed into the graves and emerged with a skull, rib, thigh, and arm bones, a coffin plate, and a necklace of beads. Since then, other cemetery lot owners, started to action by the discovery, have paid hurried visits to the last resting places of their relatives in the same cemetery with equally surprising results. No less than a score of graves have been desecrated by this unknown animal. The grave of Peter McCabe, buried last March, was found minus human bones. On top of the grave, before excavations commenced, remains of chewed bones were found. Traps have failed to catch the animal, and watchers at night return to their homes in the early morning without having seen it. Visits are being made to other cemeteries in the county, but this far, graves only in the Carter Cemetery have been molested. Unfortunately, reports of this grave-digging beastie seem largely to vanish around the 70s, and there the trail goes cold. The most recent reference, to my knowledge, comes from Barton Unley's book series, Mysterious Kentucky, and The Inhumanoids, wherein he briefly discusses the southern legend of the gravedigger, and a possible first-hand sighting of one around a Kentucky graveyard. Although it is rare, sometimes luck will shine its radiant light upon me, and I will meet another person who is at least somewhat familiar with the legend. One of these individuals was none other than a TV personality from a well-known Bigfoot program. He knew exactly what I was talking about. He had heard of them in his own hometown, even saying that he seemed to recall the town hunting them to extinction or near extinction. I often wonder if they have entirely died out. Could mankind have hunted them to complete destruction? Or could they have vanished from a lack of wooden coffins to burrow into? I cannot well say. But sometimes I sit and ponder if it is possible that the Appalachian grave robber still roams somewhere in the dark bowers of man's domain. Where did it go? What does it eat? What does it survive off of in the modern age of progress and construction, when all of the lovely and majestic forests are destroyed in favor of the concrete jungle? Perhaps it is still out there, merely burrowed deep into the bowels of the earth, far from the sight of man, keeping alive that small glimmer of mystery that I still hope is part of the world. My dad was always intrigued at the thought of these mountaintop creatures that were once so notorious. Perhaps, one day when this life is done, when me and my father are no longer separated by a layer of soil, we'll get a chance to uncover that mystery together. Yes, friends, that will be a precious day indeed, when all of the sorrow and woe of this world has departed, and Jesus Christ will be the final one to be the grave robber, on that day when death is defeated. I sincerely hope you enjoyed this short but passionately put together nightmare nugget of cryptid terror. This is the first of many to come following the passing of our founder and my dad, Johnny Henderson. The grave robber is one of many stories from his hometown that he regaled me with growing up, and I never forgot about this specific critter, though there was not much information regarding it. It is true that he used to find the holes of the Appalachian Ghoul going down deep into the soil in my family's personal cemetery. And though it is highly unlikely, I never make a visit there without keeping my eyes out for its burrows. If it is not too much trouble to ask, please give us a like on this video and subscribe to our channel, Cryptid Studies Institute. It really helps us out, and it helps to get our name further out there too. Secondly, I want to genuinely thank everyone for all the kind words and the donations that were shared to us in my dad's passing. Me and my sister are forever grateful for your kindness, and I want to promise that Cryptid Studies Institute is going nowhere. In fact, we're still working on a documentary about Indian Mound, Tennessee, which has been home to multiple cryptid beasties, So, I believe you will be well satisfied. And in conclusion, friends, this is Elijah Henderson, signing off.